Hello there, this is Roland Winters, and I'm here to tell you another story about our friend Erbert the English Bulldog. Maybe you don't know Erbert, so maybe I'd better tell you a little about him. Erbert was a big, good-hearted English Bulldog, yellowish, with brown spots on him and the biggest feet you ever saw. Also, he had trouble with his breathing and wheezed just a little. And he lived at the White Ox Inn over in England, in a town called Arftros on the Wallaby. Arftros was a lovely old town with pretty homes and a fine church all covered with ivy. The Wallaby was the sleepy old river that ran past Arftros. Erbert had gone down to the riverbank one sunny August afternoon to meet his friends Conrad the Dachshund and Tobachnikov the Russian wolfhound. But not finding them, he lay down at full length in the tall grass that ran right down to the water. And it was so sunny and so nice and so warm that Erbert fell fast asleep. Well, Erbert slept and slept, and while he slept, he dreamed about pirates and old Sir Peter Pettigrew's treasure. You see, many years before, old Sir Peter Pettigrew had come back from far-off India with his ship just loaded to the bursting point with gold. But when he sailed into the mouth of the Wallaby, he was attacked by pirates who took all of his gold away from him and made poor old Sir Peter walk the plank. Fortunately, the water was shallow and he was able to wade ashore and run for help. When the pirates found they were going to be caught, they buried the gold somewhere on the banks of the Wallaby. So, old Sir Peter Pettigrew's gold is still there, only no one knows where. Well, Erbert dreamed and dreamed, and all of a sudden, boom, just like that, something startled him. He was wide awake instantly. Would you believe it? Erbert had slept right through the afternoon, and now it was pitch black night. Herbert's back shivered, the way a dog's does when he's nervous. And somewhere an owl hooted. And then suddenly he heard somebody digging. Crunch, crunch. Right next to him, only hidden by the tall grass. Just then, the river fog got the better of Herbert's asthma, and he wheezed like this. The digging stopped. Erbert held his breath. All was quiet for a moment. Then suddenly, zip, the tall grass in front of Erbert flew apart, and there facing him was the biggest, blackest, meanest-looking dog he'd ever seen in his life, with a pirate hat with a skull and crossbones on the brim, one wooden leg, and aimed right at Herbert's head, a tremendous, great big blunderbuss. That's an old-fashioned gun with a barrel that gets wider at the end like a bugle. Slowly, the black pirate dog with the wooden leg advanced on Erbert. Well, Erbert sat there just petrified with fright, not daring to move even his tail for fear the black dog would shoot. At this, the black dog smiled. And believe me, it was not a pretty smile. He showed all his teeth, and they were big and long and very sharp-looking. Erbert shivered and tried to speak, but again all that came out was... That made the black dog laugh out loud. And it wasn't a pretty laugh either, sort of like this. And then he said, "You are frightened, senor, because you think maybe I will kill you." Well, you know, senor, you should be frightened, because I think maybe I will kill you. I do not like your pushed-in face. I do not like your yellow color with those silly brown spots. I do not like your whizzing, and I do not like a spy. Well, although he was very frightened, Erbert managed to say, "See here, Governor, I don't think it's very nice of you to mention it, but I can't do nothing about me color or me face, and I can't help it if I have a bit of trouble with me bronical tubes. But I ain't no spy, no, nor never was, swelp me Bob. Is that your name, idiot? Is what me name? The last thing you have said, swelp me Bob. No, of course that's not me name. Me name's Erbert. Well, what means swelp me Bob? Now Erbert got a little of his courage back as he answered, That's the trouble with you foreigners. You can't none of you speak the King's English. Swelp me Bob means so help me Bob. Who is this Bob? He ain't nobody. Well, why do you call on him to help you? No. It's just an expression, a saying like. At this, the big black dog got very angry. And giving his long, snaky tail a swirl, he said, Espy or no espy, it does not matter. You have discovered my secret and you shall die. But first, you shall dig up my treasure for me. Why should I do the work when there is a big fool like you here to do it for me? Treasure? Said Erbert. You mean old Sir Peter Pettigrew's treasure? What's buried here on the river bank no one knows where? You are right. It is Sir Peter's treasure. But you are wrong, because I know where it is. Here is a map, and it's 3 feet due north from the big oak tree on the river bank. There is the tree. This is 3 feet due north. There is a spade, and this is a loaded gun. So please to pick up the spade and start digging. After you have dug up the treasure for me, then, my friend, I, Don Pedro Lopez Alvarez de la Mancha y Pasquale di Chili con Cani y Tortillas, shall kill you. Dig. And then the big black dog with the pirate hat and the wooden leg raised the blunderbuss and showed his long teeth in that ugly smile of his. Oh, boy, did Erbert dig. Crunch. Crunch went the spade, and the earth flew in showers. And all the time he was digging, Erbert kept trying to think of some way out of his trouble. But to save his soul, he couldn't. Don Pedro, the pirate dog, just sat by on an old stump, watching and smiling that very unpleasant smile. And he kept the loaded blunderbuss pointed right at Erbert all the time. My, how Erbert wished for his big, strong friend Tobachnikov, the Russian wolfhound. Or Pat, his Irish setter cousin from Ireland. Or even little Conrad, the dachshund. Anybody who could help him, but no one came, and all was darkness and quiet, save for the crunching of Erbert's spade. And once in a while in the distance, that lonesome owl would hoot. Pretty soon Erbert had dug so far down that he couldn't see out of the hole anymore. Poor Erbert's back began to ache something fierce because, just between you and me, Erbert was the kind of dog who believed in taking things easy, and he wasn't used to so much violent exercise. On top of this, the mosquitoes started to bite him. And every time he'd straighten up to slap at a mosquito, Don Pedro would raise the muzzle of his blunderbuss so that it pointed right at Erbert's head, and back he'd go to digging, just leaving the mosquito to go on biting. I'm telling you, Erbert was really in a bad way. Just when it seemed that Erbert couldn't dig another dig, when it seemed as though he'd have to stop and scratch even if Don Pedro shot him twice, once in front and once in back, his spade struck something solid. It was wooden by the sound, and Don Pedro heard it too and yelled, "Dig faster, dig!" Erbert just churned up the earth like one of those big steam shovels you see, until finally he uncovered a big wooden chest, all crisscrossed with iron bands to make it strong, and covered with green mold from being so long in the earth. Well, Erbert forgot all about his aching back, and all about the mosquitoes, and everything else. He was so eager to open the chest and find out what was inside it, but he didn't dare move, because Don Pedro still had that great big blunderbuss aimed right at his head. At last, Don Pedro spoke. All these years, I have waited for this moment. And at last it is here. I have found the treasure of the old Sir Peter Pettigrew, and I am now the richest dog in the whole world. Open the chest, idiot. Here is the key. And he tossed a big brass key down to Erbert.
But, Don Pedro, there ain't no lock to fit this key into.
No lock?
No, see here. Blimey, but I think she's open.
And Erbert heaved on the lid with all his might. With a creak, the lid came up, and Erbert looked into... Guess what? Well, Erbert looked into an empty chest. When Don Pedro saw that the chest was empty, he jumped down beside Erbert, leaving the blunderbuss behind in his excitement. Inside the chest was a note which said, "Sorry, Don Pedro, but you are too late. I was given a copy of the map made by one of your sailors who was caught. Signed, Sir Pettigrew, 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 son of Sir Peter Pettigrew, Pettigrew." Now, Erbert knew that Don Pedro had left his blunderbuss behind. So, with a terrific leap, Erbert shot out of the hole and ran straight for the woods, bellowing, "Help! Help!" Wham! Went Don Pedro's gun, and the bullet whistled right by Herbert's ear. Erbert began to zigzag. Wham! Went the big gun again. Erbert realized he couldn't make the woods, so he doubled back toward the river. Wham! Another bullet from Don Pedro, and this one came so close that it shot one of the brown spots right off Herbert's back without his even knowing it. Just then, Erbert got to the riverbank. Don Pedro took careful aim when out of the darkness a voice called, "Ah, look, over here." Don Pedro whirled around. And immediately another voice called, "Whish no, this way, you black, ugly beast, over here." Don Pedro whirled to the other side. And a third voice bellowed out, "Behind you, look behind you, you are surrounded." At this, Don Pedro whirled completely around and fired the blunderbuss straight up in the air. With that, three figures sprang from as many different directions, and, well, it was quite a fight while it lasted. But in less time than it takes to tell, Don Pedro was tied hand and foot, while over him stood Herbert's two friends, Conrad the Dachshund and Tobachnikov the Russian wolfhound, together with Herbert's Irish cousin Pat, the Irish setter.
"Oh, lads, you've saved me life, that's what you've done," sobbed Erbert. "And I'll never, ever, never forget you for it." "Now hush your blathering, you thundering great spalpeen, you," said Pat. "When you didn't come home at dark, we knew you'd blundered into some kind of trouble, and we'd been looking for you all night." And Conrad said, "Then we heard the shooting, and I said, that sounds like a revolver."
Tobachnikov said, "And I said, boy, something here is smelling from herring. Our friend is in trouble."
And then Pat jumped in again and said, "Then we saw this here pirate fella taking pot shots at you, like a farm boy at the county fair, and we attacked, and there he lies, and bad cess to him."
Well, Erbert was really touched. Big tears glistened in his eyes. He wheezed a little as he looked at his three friends, and then he said, "Me lads, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of me heart. Friends in need is friends indeed. That's all I can say." Then Erbert glanced down at Don Pedro and added, "Swelp me bob."